Hello, my name is Sandy Adamitis, the social media director for the Page International Screenwriting Awards, and your host for the Writers Hangout, a podcast that celebrates the many stages of writing, from inspiration to the first draft, revising, getting a project made, and everything in between. We'll talk to the best and the brightest in the entertainment industry and create a space where you can hang out, learn from the pros, and have fun. Hey writers, it's Sandy. We have a great show for you today. I interview a special guest on the pod, Page Judge Nate Adams. Nate is an award-winning writer, director, and producer with over 20 years of experience in entertainment. His career started out as an actor, but quickly transitioned into screenwriter, where Nate was rewriting and polishing scripts for some of the biggest producers in Hollywood. In 2006, Nate started directing and producing, and he hasn't looked back since. Writers, I have to apologize because seconds before I started this interview with Nate, my mic crashed and the following audio isn't up to our usual standards. That said, it's my audio that is messed up, not Nate's. And since he's the one who's speaking words of wisdom, we decided to go ahead and drop this episode. Please enjoy. Nate Adams, thank you so much for joining us on the Writers Hangout.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Sandy. I appreciate you having me.
Nate, you are a producer with a slate of terrific projects, 2 decades of experience as a screenwriter, and more than 10 years of experience as a producer and director. What got you first interested?
You know, I was always interested in this business. The problem is I grew up in an extremely tiny town in Montana and didn't know anyone, even in the stratosphere of Los Angeles or Hollywood, as I probably would have thought of it then. I started out in college. So I went to college on a wrestling scholarship, and I got into doing plays and did stand-up comedy. So it was very unusual in terms of, the sports and the athletics that I did and the people that I did it with.
Nate, sorry. I think of you when you just said that as a 90s rom-com character. So you were into wrestling and you were in the plays.
There's a script about my senior year of high school that is something that I've been working on for quite a few years. I was into acting when I got here. I came here in the mid-90s to Los Angeles. I didn't know a single person. I didn't have any clue of how this business worked. And I fortunately, for probably 4-ish years, I squeaked out a living as an actor, doing commercials. I did some TV guest appearances and worked on some shows and, roughly made about $20,000 a year for 4 or 5 years, really just barely making enough to pay my rent. And
Nate, trying to act in this town is so difficult. Bravo for you doing as much as you did.
Yeah. I mean, it was again, it's just one of those things where you get, I taught acting and did a lot of acting classes and a lot of acting, plays and workshops and I really enjoyed it. And then I wrote a movie that was going to be my Rocky, which is how I got into screenwriting, and it was about a wrestler. So because I knew that I would be able to do that very well. So, right. And that movie almost got made about 3 different times. And, I learned an incredible amount with that script and learned an incredible amount of what not to do. I killed that movie from being made at least twice by just being stupid.
Do you mind sharing one of those examples of how you might have stopped your movie from being made? I think that's really interesting.
This is a story that I've had to talk to lots of writers about because a writer, there's a lot of different kinds of writing. And when you listen to like writing podcasts and things about screenwriting, and generally the guys that you're listening to are studio they write studio movies. And if you write studio movies, then that's a very different world than writing independent films and writing
Yeah.
smaller features. And so, my movie that I wrote, I wanted to act in it, and there's a guy named Greg Shapiro who produced The Hurt Locker, and he loved the script, and this is before he did Hurt Locker, and he really wanted to make it, and I kept, you know, holding out to act in it. I was so determined. And
Hmm.
I was also so sort of hard-headed about the story. And, I would argue with directors who didn't know certain things about maybe wrestling, but they had their own idea about storytelling, which, I look back on being, holding out to demanding that I have to act or in the film that was killing it once. And then, arguing with the director about things that were really, frankly, at that point, none of my business as a writer. Now being a director myself, when
Okay.
you're the writer, your job is to write the script. Your job is not what goes on the screen. That's the director's job. But I didn't know that. But I was dead determined, and also like you don't really understand like when a director has a vision for a film or a way that he wants to make something, it's not your vision anymore. Your vision as a writer, and I deal with this a lot even now, where I've produced and directed a bunch of documentaries, which I really enjoy. I also produce feature films. When you produce a feature film, there's so many cooks in the kitchen, and like if you're like I was, which was very hard headed and not very smart in the early days, and when I didn't know how to collaborate, making a documentary is terrific because it's just you and an editor. And I've been very successful at that part of filmmaking,
Right.
and it's different when there's a massive team of people, and department heads and lots of people that you have to deal with and other producers and
All who take their
financiers.
job, yeah, all who take their job very seriously.
Yeah, it's just an interesting world, and now it's funny to come full circle. And sometimes, like I read for the Page Awards, so I've optioned quite a few scripts out of there. I've made a few of them. I've gotten a few of them made into features.
I was going to ask this question, so let's jump into it now. As you've mentioned, you've been a page judge for past several years. When you are reading, in what ways do you think your own experience as a writer and your special storytelling ability give you an advantage in discovering new projects?
I would be what would be considered a creative producer. Like you can have a conversation with me about the script, and I completely understand story structure and scene sequences, and what the first plot point is, and when the act changes happen, and what are character moments that are important, and the tone of a film and the visual aspects of a film. Like I completely understand all of that jargon, and I understand, like I'm not just talking, I know why you have it and what it is. So
Nate, that
y-
is
you know
such a good point. That is such a good point because there are different kind of producers.
there are a lot of producers, and especially in the lower budget world that I work in, that the movies to them are sort of like widgets, where it's like, hey, we're going to make this, and we got this actor and this much money, and we're going to do it in this many days, and that's what we have.
Right.
And if you're a writer, you have to understand. It's funny. So at one point, the wrestling script that I had written, we had Alan Rudolph was going to direct it, and Brad Renfro, when he was alive, was going to play the part that I gave up, and Gary Oldman was going to play the father. And
Wow. Interesting cast.
yeah, no, it would have been it would have been great
Wow.
if it would have
Yeah,
got made.
that would have
Um,
been amazing.
but the way that this stuff goes, it's always such an interesting process for me. Like as sort of at that time, like this is like early 2000s. Like I really didn't know anything, and to be involved in the process of listening to an experienced director, talking to experienced cast, and like basically that at that point the movie fell apart after we'd already done like location scouting, and it was awful. But that's part of what happens in this process of like low budget filmmaking, where sometimes for some people, like in that case, it kind of was going to be a labor of love where like Gary took much less money than his normal price because he wanted to play the role, and he wanted to work with Alan, who's the director. And then other times, this is a long way to get to this point, but some of the lower budget producers, some of the genre spaces, which is action, thriller, horror, you know, they need product. So they make movies on some levels like widgets. So you really you have to understand as a writer, and this is what one of the things that Alan Rudolph told me is he said, hey, do one for you and then do one for sort of commerce so that you're making a living.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, that's kind of an interesting idea of, you know, a way to do it. And for me, sometimes I look at the documentaries like that, where like that's the one I get to do and nobody creatively really does very much with the material that I have except for me. And then, when you do bigger things or features, sometimes, you just, it always isn't going to be a perfect script. And I didn't understand that in the beginning. And I didn't understand like how much a day of production costs or,
Right.
what people's schedules are with trying to secure talent and, how the process works. You think, oh, I'm the writer. I created this world. Everyone has to listen to me. And they don't.
Nate, I was in the middle of a conversation once about when I was working on a TV show and wasn't a regular actor, but had a significant role. And she had conflicts. And so we were trying to figure out how to, still make everything happen. And little naive me goes, well, can't we talk to the actress and let her know just how great the role is in this episode? And the powers that be all chuckled because it's about availability and time and constraints. And as much as we always want it to be about the magic of the story, people are making a living.
Mm-hmm.
Does that?
Yeah, you really have to understand. I mean, the biggest advice, like, and even writers, like there's lots of times I've wanted to option scripts or get scripts from writers, even from the Page Awards, where if I sort of smell the person that I used to be on them of like this is the guy who's going to be really hard to deal with and not if the director changes a story at all he's going to freak out and make it difficult. I don't even go down those roads.
Yes, I think what you're saying is so important. And I would love to just kind of like focus in on that. What do you look for in a writer?
Yeah, I mean, I found a script. I found a script in the Page Awards that we made with Morgan Freeman and Ruby Rose, and
Yes.
it ended up getting distributed by Lionsgate. And we had to shoot it right after COVID, and we did not have a lot of shoot days. The movie did really well, all for Lionsgate and everybody. It's in my mind, I think we could have probably done a little better, but we definitely did the very best we could with what was available to us. That's for sure. But that was a script that I'd found in the Page Awards, and that was a writer that I really loved named Sam Bartlett. And I'm doing another project with him right now. We have a Harvey Keitel movie of his script that we're doing in Italy in January. And the reason I'm working with him again is because he was so easy to work with. He was like, dude, I'll help you. You tell me what you need. He doesn't have an agent and manager telling me like, oh, if my guy rewrites one sentence, you have to pay him $10,000. Well, when you make independent movies, until you're making the movie, you don't have any money. So if you want to write studio movies and you have an agent or manager, and my own agent and manager have killed deals for me before too, when I had them, because
Darn
they're
them.
in the business. Well, they're in the business of making money, but you also
Yes.
have to decide when you're a new writer, do you believe in the producer you're working with, first of all? If it's some guy who's like you met at Starbucks who is working at Starbucks and has never produced anything, well, that's probably not going to be great. But if the guy, if you look him up on IMDb and he's produced multiple movies and working with other people who've produced, the guy I produced these movies with has produced probably 50 movies. So if you look him up, you go, oh, okay. You know, and like I said, Sam was so great in that process that when it was like a no brainer to work with him again. So to get
Um,
another movie made for him. And so hopefully that's kind of where we are with that, you know,
yeah, that's
and
great.
it,
It's kind of the flip side in the same way. Another way of also looking at that question is what can writers do to make sure they have a good reputation in the business
like I
and
said,
that
it's a really fine line, and you have to use your own. This is where you sort of, as a person, have to, like I said, you have to suss out and kind of find a producer that works with you and that you kind of gel with and like, okay, I like this guy, I like what he's saying, I like what we're talking about with story. And I mean, I was very direct with Sam about, hey, this, we don't have a lot of days to make this movie and this is what we're doing. He was very excited because it was his first movie, so he just wanted to get it made. And for your first movie, I think that's a great way to look at it. Is okay, let's get a movie
let's
made.
get
So i'm
paid.
so
Yeah.
i'm 10, I'm different than all the millions of other writers out there. Is I have a movie that was made with a bankable star. That's a big separation for a lot of people.
I
um
had, Nate, I had the amazing luck to happen to know Al Ruddy. And for the writers out there, he produced The Godfather and The Million Dollar Baby.
mhm.
Al told me that to be a good producer, you have to get up every day and you have to push your project. You have to do something every day to move your project forward. That
Mhm.
can be just like casting, getting a script out, or something like that. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, of course. I definitely think that you have to do that. As a producer, you have to constantly be, even as a writer, to finish scripts and finish drafts of scripts. You have
Oh,
to
good point.
always be you have to always walk forward. I believe this very strongly in life. I meet so many people who get stuck on one script and don't move on. Don't I did this a little bit with that script I was talking about, where I rewrote that script probably 200 times instead of just moving on, write 10 more scripts. Don't stick on the same script forever. Even my agents used to be like, stop rewriting that script. You have tons of fans around town. Now you need new material. It's different for some people, to create new material is much more difficult. Like I started getting quite a bit of work rewriting other people's material, which I found to be pretty good at, or I found myself to be pretty good at and easy for me to do. Because it's really easy for me to look at material and go, oh, okay, here's what this needs. I've always been pretty fortunate in terms of having a good ear for dialogue and understanding like how people talk and being able to separate characters so they don't all talk the same. And that's to me always a sign of a first time writer or new writer. It's when all the characters talk the same.
Right. In your process working with writers, when you have your producer hat and potentially director's hat on, how does that process look? Do you like to sit with the writer? Do you like to make a ton of notes? What's it like for you?
So we have a TV show we're taking out with Patrick Warburton and Rob Riggle. It's a half hour. And for that, a friend of mine wrote it, and then I I sort of took what he did and said, hey, what about this, this, and this, and this? And he's like, wow, that really makes it way better. Let's do, so then we started working on it together and we developed it into what it became, you know, from his idea. And, now we're just about to take that TV show out next week. We shot a little proof of concept, and if it's a film, you know, really depends on what the level that I work at, which is, a sort of a $4 to $10 million budget, is generally like you talk to the writer. Sometimes they have reps, sometimes they don't. If they don't have reps, it's better. Like my experience with Sam, where I can give Sam notes, the producer can give Sam, the other producer can give Sam notes. When we get a director on board, he can give Sam notes and Sam can take a shot
Mhm.
at it. And then at the end of the day, the director probably going to want to take the final pass because it's his script, and he needs to make it what he's going to shoot, and and this is where, like, as a writer, you have to learn to kind of let go of whatever you thought this was going to be, unless you're the director, and you know, unless you have rich parents or rich family members who are going to give you a bunch of money, you're not going to be the director as much as you want to be. So, and you have to come to terms with that. And if you don't want to come to terms with that, and this is what I tell some of my friends who are writers, then write a book, write it into a novel, make it, and then no one will ever be able to tell you anything about it. Because I wish
Right.
someone would have told me that, make it a novel if you don't want anyone to be able to change your story at all. Because otherwise, people are going to change your story. They're going to make it different. And in your mind, it's going to be worse because you made it the best that it could possibly be, because that's whatever you wrote. So, you've got to, like, you just have to understand that at the end of the day, a film is a collaborative medium, and you're going to have to let go of, once you're done with it, once you turn in your writing draft to the producer, because the producer may go, all right, this is a great idea. It's not executed the way that I want it to be. So I'm going to hire my friend who's a great writer that I've worked with a bunch, and he's going to fix it for me.
You've mentioned collaboration a couple times, and your movie Road Hard with
Uh-huh.
Adam Carolla, to
Yep.
me personally, has this Judy Garland, Mickey Rooney, let's put on a show quality. You guys made that movie with ingenuity, favors, and Bryan
Oh yeah.
Cranston. Can you tell
We
us a
made it
little
with
bit of that
no
story?
money. Yeah, I mean, we crowdfunded the movie. We ended up raising 1.5 million and shooting the movie for 1.2 million, and using the other
Wow.
300,000 to, like, pay back all the people with the perks and all the junk we had to buy for everybody. That was the first time I worked with Adam, who basically has been my partner for about 10 years. We've worked on a bunch of stuff together. And I've produced some stuff separately from him. But yeah, I mean, that movie was a classic. That movie was great because Adam and his good buddy and writing partner at that time, Kevin Hench, co-directed it. And I was really the only producer on the movie, with another friend of mine who wasn't super experienced as a producer. So, we shot that all over LA. We used Jimmy Kimmel's set. Adam called in, like, every favor in the world. We shot in, like, 3 houses that Adam owned. I mean, we just called in, like, every favor ever of people, and shot in all kinds of different. I mean, I think we shot in Phil Rosenthal, the guy who created Everybody Loves Raymond. Shot in his house. We shot, like, we got
And
David
he
Allen
was in the movie.
Greer, and we got, huh? Yeah, Phil's in the movie. Yeah, David Allen Greer and Phil play Adam's friends. I mean, the movie is, like, a loosely based on Adam's life. If it's about a guy who did a show called The Bro Show, which Adam did the Man Show with Jimmy Kimmel. So the
Right.
movie is about a guy who did a show called The Bro Show, and one of them, and 2 guys who did The Bro Show. One of them is Adam, and one of them is Jay Moore. And Jay Moore went on to be a big famous talk show host. And Adam in the movie lives in his ex-wife's guest house and has to travel around the country doing stand-up comedy to squeak out a living. And his life is terrible. It has a lot of funny moments in it. And, the fact that we made that movie and how good it looks for 1.2 million is incredible.
Oh, hey, on
Yeah.
a personal note, I want to thank you for doing a K Rock doc. I'm going
Oh,
to be the
yeah.
first in line to watch it. Can you give me an update? K Rock, of course, is the legendary, iconic radio station in Los Angeles,
Yeah.
really big during the
Uh,
90s.
it's going to be, right now it's 4 episodes, and I'm trying to kind of get the financing to expand it to 6. But I mean, I've interviewed everyone from U2, Blink 182, Chris Martin, Beck, Green Day, Tom Morello. I mean, you name it, I've interviewed them. All the old DJs, Tony Hawk. It will be the biggest, like, music series ever, because K Rock broke pretty much every alternative and new wave and punk band you've ever heard of. Like, you've never heard of one of those bands in those music genres that wasn't probably broken by K Rock.
I remember hearing some vague story about I forget where K Rock was, but it was like small and the back door was always open or something.
It used to be
It
in
was,
Pasadena, yeah,
oh,
there
okay.
was a back door, yeah. There was some like a little like dumpy building where like one there was a uniform supply store, and in the back was K Rock, and like that's where they broadcast from.
Please do a segment on an episode on the back door. Oh, wait, that sounds
Haha,
weird. Yeah,
right?
okay. Never mind. I'm editing that
Uh,
out.
no, you should leave it in.
Oh my. Is there any specific advice you might have that you would like to share with the writers out there that I might not have?
I usually read the horror thriller scripts, and
Right.
it's I guess it's one thing like when writing teachers and people go, hey, just write whatever you want and write for any budget that you want and yada yada. My advice would be that's understanding if you're writing Top Gun, but also understand that 4 movies a year like Top Gun get made. And generally it's guys like Christopher Nolan who are making them, and these days they're just reboots of movies they've already made. So
Yeah.
getting your new Top Gun in there is going to be, I don't want to say impossible, but close to impossible. So you kind of need to understand if you want your movie to be made, feel free to write whatever version budget wise that you want. But I would, in my back pocket, this would be advice I would give writers if someone asked me, and I have given this advice to writers, but understand what's the $5 million version of your idea look like, or what is there a version of it that's like that? And I'll take an example of a script that I read this year. I won't say anything too much about it, but it's like a horror thriller that's it's set in like the late 1800s. It's basically like a typical possession story with a demon. I mean, I've read so many scripts in my life at this point. I've read different
Hmm.
versions of this same story where someone gets possessed by a demon, and it's traveling around through different people and whatever environment you're in. This one is in the late 1800s, and it's on a boat going through the Arctic. And, as a producer, when I read that, I go, oh, this is a $40 million movie. you
That's
know,
what I was thinking.
because, you're going to start getting ice into it. You're going to try to shoot on a boat. I mean, these are all things that as a low budget producer, you go, nope, no boats, no ocean, no pets, and no kids. Okay, if this is a story that you love, which is great, and there are certain relationships within the context of the story, but you go, hey, what if it was contemporary, and if it was on a long flight or something that's more doable? Why does it have to be in the late 1800s? Because that costs a bunch of money to make things, period. You know what I mean? And,
Right.
in your mind as a writer, what is it about that story that you fell in love with that really makes you want to tell it? And maybe it is the fact that it's a period piece and it's this and it's that. And I'm sure you can talk to all those things, but, you know, I can just tell you right now, you're not going to get that movie ain't getting made, unless Christopher Nolan decides that he would make that movie for some peculiar reason. My advice to up and coming writers and people who want to be writers: be a collaborative person. Go out there, try to get your material in the best possible scenario that it can be in for it to get made and for it to have the best opportunity that it can to get made. There are a lot of platforms now to get things made, and it's not that expensive to make films anymore. But I did a lot of work in distribution also. And I think in order to be successful in this business, you have to do that. And that's why, like, as a writer, I was saying, like, don't only have one script and don't only have one idea. And if you only have one script and only one idea, you're not really a writer because you need to
Yeah.
always be moving on. You need to move on to your next project. because the one thing that will make that script that's so precious to you 10,000 times less
Right.
precious is to have a new script. And then
Exactly.
that one won't be such a big deal because now you have five. And then you're
Right.
like, oh, okay,
That
you
that
know.
is such that is such good advice. And I think for writers and their peace of mind, even that alone, don't get obsessed over that one script. Keep moving forward.
I think you always should be moving forward and always writing something new. You always should be moving on. You always should have a book or a notebook of ideas, where because
Love
as you're
that.
writing like one story, there's always something that pops in your head or pops in, or one story that for me it's like there's things that won't leave me alone, and then I realize, oh, eventually I have to write that.
Hey, thank you so much for sharing all that knowledge that you have. Before you go, would you like to do a pop quiz?
Sure.
Great. The pop quiz is going to be on a movie called Road Hard. And we call this pop quiz You Produced the Movie, but do you know the movie? Now, we already talked about what Road Hard is about, but I'll just do a little synopsis.
Hmm.
Desperate to revitalize his once successful television career, an embittered comedian, Adam Carolla, is forced to hit the road and perform in low profile stand up gigs. I have watched the movie because I really liked it. I watched it, I think, when it came out, and then again for this interview. Are you ready, Nate, for the first question?
Yeah, I don't get these wrong.
Okay. Now, we like to give you confidence at the beginning of the pop quiz. So, we're going to give you an easy one. What does Adam Carolla's character, Bruce, do for a living?
He's a stand-up comedian.
Yes. Question number two. What was the name of the reality show Adam Carolla's character, Bruce, starred in?
The Bro Show.
Reality show.
The reality show. Adam's character and Jay Moore's character did a reality show called The Bro Show, which is how he was
Right.
famous.
I'll give you a hint. Alyssa Milano.
Was it like dancing? Did we do a Dancing with the Stars bit in there?
But it was celebrity barn raising.
Oh, Celebrity Barn Race. Okay, that was a bit
I,
that was in the movie where they talked about. He was talking about that with Larry Miller, who played his manager.
Adam, Bruce, gets charged twice for a fee on his credit card for doing what?
My God, charged twice for a fee on his credit card. I'm trying to think. Like, this is a decade ago. Oh, well, he kept getting locked out of his room.
You want a hint?
Go ahead. I don't know what. I don't.
Smoking in the
Oh,
hotel.
smoking in the. Yes. For smoking. We had to go buy a smoke fan from Home Depot and change out the one they had in the bathroom at the hotel that we were shooting in so we could blow the smoke into it. Yes. Because if you don't know Adam, he's so specific about everything. Like he used to be a construction guy, so he was super specific even about the kind of bathroom fan he wanted.
What does Adam's Bruce ex-wife's boyfriend Chad do
David
for a
Keckner.
living? Do you need me to say that again?
What does Chad do for a living?
Yeah, what does Chad do for a living?
Oh my God.
And how much do you hate me right now?
Oh no, I'm just laughing at how much of the detail, like I remember everything about shooting every scene, like David Keckner's scene when he runs away from Adam in the movie is
Mhm.
one of the times on the set that I laughed harder than that, and when David Allen Greer did his stand up in the club. Those were the two times where I was laughing till I was crying. David Keckner just ran away. like from, he was talking about there's something about masturbating, but he ran away and he just turned around and ran away. Like it didn't make any sense at all why he would run away. but he just ran away like he was a scared little kid. God, I don't know. Was he a therapist or he was some kind of a holistic person?
He made jewelry.
He was like a holistic kind of a one of those kind of guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nate, you're not doing very well. Okay.
Well, there was a lot of the stuff on Road Hard was made up. A lot of the dialogue, like the little details you're talking about now, those were
Yes.
just probably not even in the script.
Okay. What job does Jay Moore, who's playing the Jimmy Kimmel character, offers Adam Carolla Bruce a job? What does he offer him to do?
Audience warm up guy. See, that's a
Yes.
plot point from the actual story, not an innocuous thing. That's a really small detail of like what's David Koechner's job. Who's like David Koechner? Just for anyone who wants to know, David Koechner shot one day on the movie. That's how big his character is. He shot one day, so
And
that's
he
why I
did.
wouldn't remember what he did. But
And he,
Adam, yeah, he gets offered by Jay Moore to be an audience warm up person.
okay. What stand up comic plays himself and gives Adam advice?
What guy? Oh, Howie Mandel.
Nope.
Not Howie. All right, let me think. Well, Howie plays
Not
himself
Howie.
in the movie. Howie plays himself because we shot that in Howie's warehouse. Let's see. David Allen Greer.
Nope. And not Phil
He played
Rosenthal.
him. They both played themselves. Their name was David and Phil. Let me think of what other stand-up comic gave advice in the movie that. Let's see.
I'll give you the answer. Dana Gould.
Oh, Dana.
Dana, how could you forget Dana Gould, Nate?
Because you have to remember when I produced this, Dana's part was very quick. It was in a hotel bar.
Right.
It was really fast.
Next question. Why does Bruce, Adam, like woodworking in relation to his current job?
It's the one thing where he can actually see something done.
He says it's the exact opposite of comedy. Comedy is about tearing everything apart, and I'd like to start putting things together. I really like that. I like that moment in the movie a lot.
Yeah, I love
Giving
Diane Farr, who played the love interest. She was awesome.
love her so much.
She was
What line of
great.
dialogue does Bruce's love interest, Sarah, who we were just talking about, played by Diane Farr, say that leaves a big impression on Adam? It's her line of dialogue that leaves a big impression on Adam. And you can see him emotionally moving forward with her. What does she say? It's very kind of casual.
I don't remember the scene. I don't remember the dialogue, so I'm not
It
going
would
to
be
remember.
women should like it when their man is working.
Oh, yeah, then when he's complaining about his ex-wife.
Yeah. Adam gets a kiss from Sarah when he impresses her by doing what?
Fixing her door.
Yes. What's your favorite podcast?
What's my favorite podcast? Well, I'd have to give a shout out to Adam and say the Adam Carolla Show.
Nope, it's the Writers Hangout. Sorry about that.
Oh, the Writers Hangout.
What's the best racing movie ever made?
I personally think Le Mans by Steve McQueen is pretty
You
good.
got it right. What is the name of the game show Howie Mandel wants Adam to host?
And that is funny because that's a real game show that Adam pitched. Renaissance Man.
That's funny because I was thinking I would watch that reality show.
No, it's a real show that Adam actually pitched.
Okay, Nate, you got out of 12 questions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 right.
That should be a fail. That should be a failing grade of getting 50%. 50% is failing in my own movie.
Nate Adams, thank you so much for hanging out with us on the Writers Hangout. I've had such an enjoyable time talking with
Well,
you.
thank you for having me, Sandy. I appreciate it.
That's a wrap for the Writers Hangout. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, like, and thrive. Till we get to hang out again, keep writing. The world needs your stories. The Writers Hangout is sponsored by the Page International Screenwriting Awards. Executive producer, Kristen O'Verne. Producers, Terry Sampson and Sandy Adamitis. Music by Ethan Stoller.